Good evening, everyone. It's me, Doctor Plague. We talk a lot about horror on this channel, but the real horror out there is how easy it is for your data to fall in the hands of disreputable people. That's why today's video is sponsored by Aura. While you're enjoying today's spooky video, data brokers, those things that go bump on the web, could already be selling your information to scanners, spammers, and anyone else who may want to target you. Your full name, email, home address, your health records, your relatives, they could all be out there. That's why I've been using Aura. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests, just for me. It was simple to use and very intuitive, and I had barely gotten out of the setup process, and it was already blocking over 20 data broker requests on my behalf. Aura protects your passwords, your banking information, everything you need for day-to-day online life. Cleaning up my information not only helps reduce the amount of spam I get, but it also protects me from hackers who could use my information to help them access my social media accounts, bank accounts, other sensitive information. Things like a certain YouTube channel that you all enjoy listening to so much. Aura also does much more to protect me and my family from online threats, the kind you can't see. It comes with other features like antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and more, without having to download several different apps. It really is just that easy to set up, and best of all, I get everything at one affordable price. I hear you saying, but Dr. Plague, I have one or two of these tools already. But, dear readers, not having Aura is like locking the front door and leaving the back door wide open. Readers of my fine tales can tell you why that never ends well. Aura is always on, doing the hard work of keeping me safe so I can focus on other tasks like finishing my latest book or uploading my most recent video. I value my privacy, and I know you value yours. You can go to aura.com, that's AURA.com, to start your 2-week free trial. You can also check out the link below and start your free trial with Aura. So why not give Aura a try and protect yourself from the real monsters out there? I drummed my fingers on the desk, watching the clock as it ticked closer and closer to time. 11:54, and still no Carl. I was worried maybe he had figured out what I was doing tonight, but I didn't see how. If he'd seen me on the cameras as I confronted the orderly, then he still wouldn't have known about the meeting. The cameras at our facility don't have sound. Most of them don't, and if he had seen me, all he would know was that I had interacted with him. The fact that I hadn't told him would likely make him curious, but I was afraid he'd be angry instead of simply unsure. Carl was on edge most of the time these days, and he seemed always on the verge of a mental breakdown. I checked the clock and blew out through my teeth when I saw that it was 11:58. I had wanted to get there before him, to be sure there wasn't some trap waiting for me, but I suppose he wasn't going to just appear there at midnight. If he was, I wanted to see that too, but I figured he would arrive as he usually did. I was a little nervous about meeting with the mysterious figure, but I had resolved to go. I didn't think he would hurt me. I was no longer sure he was hurting anyone anymore. But you never could tell with things from the spooky side of the tracks. I had written down some questions I wanted to ask him, but most of it would be just stuff off the cuff. The clock on the wall toned. Midnight. Still no Carl. I'd told him I needed to do something at midnight. I'd called to remind him, in fact, but I hadn't liked the way he had sounded when I called him at 9. His whole tone had changed when he picked up, and I didn't like the sound of him when he said that he would be there. I could be overthinking it. My nerves ratcheted up as I prepared with my meeting with the red-clad orderly. I heard the scuff of boots and looked up to see Carl coming into the reception area. It was 12:02, so he hadn't kept me waiting too long. "Sorry I'm late," he said, not sounding particularly sorry at all. "Had something I had to take care of." No problem, I told him, getting up as I signed out so he could have the computer. I might be a few minutes today, but I'll keep my ears out for code blues. Yeah, we wouldn't want something like yesterday to happen again, he said, his life sounding a little strained. I laughed too, my own problem sounding just as bad, and as I went to leave, he called my name and I stopped. You aren't planning to do something I should know about, are you? My skin prickled a little. There was no way that he could know about my meeting. It had to be a guess or something, but the way he said it made me wonder if I was doing something wrong. Maybe I should tell him what I was going to do. Maybe I should take him with me so he could get the answers he wanted too. I didn't know, but I knew the orderly hadn't killed that woman last night. She had died, but he hadn't been the cause of it. That made me question what Carl claimed to know. I needed answers before I told him what I knew. The only way to get them was to meet with the orderly. No, Carl, I'm just going on break. He was quiet for a moment, and I glanced at the clock and saw it was pushing towards 12:04. How long would he actually wait? Okay, then. Have a good break, he said, turning back to fiddle with the computer. I made my way up the hall before I could second-guess myself. The cafeteria was shadowy, as it usually was after hours, but the lights in the dining room were on in case people wanted somewhere to eat at night. The serving area was dark, the steel gleaming mutely, and it gave me the creeps, as it always did. I scanned the sitting area, almost missing him at first, and when I noticed him sitting in the corner, I jumped a little despite myself. He was sitting in a shadowy alcove, a cup of coffee in front of him, steam gliding up into his face, and when I came in, he looked up and smiled wetly at me. That gave me a whole new shudder, but I tried to hide it as I came in. Like I said last time, I can't really remember what the guy looked like. Anytime I try, my head hurts, and I end up describing the things I can recall. He's pale, he's bald, he's got crystal blue eyes that seem unnaturally bright, and he looks thick through the body. I'm sure he has facial features, but they refuse to stay in my mind for very long. He was sitting in the corner, the shadows gathering around him like a cloak, and it was the hardest thing I'd ever done to take my seat in front of him. "You're late," he said, not bothering to look at the clock. "Sorry, I had to wait for my relief to get there." He shrugged. "It's your time." We sat in silence for a moment, me trying to figure out what to say before just blurting out the first thing that came to mind. "What are you? How did you come to be here?" He laughed. "Straight to the point. I like that. The word for what I am is something that your kind cannot understand, but I suppose you would call us guides. We are in all cultures, all civilizations, and we have gone by many names throughout the years. We've existed since the start of humanity, and we will be here when it takes its final, gasping breath." "What is it that you guide?" I asked, believing I knew the answer, but wanting him to say it. "Souls," he said, "or what you think of as a soul. When someone's body dies, the soul is released. When this happens, they're often scared or confused. The guides will come to take them to the next stage of life." I nodded, exactly as I'd thought. "Do you act as a guide for all the spirits here?" "I try. We usually know when a person will die with some degree of accuracy. Some go sooner, some linger longer. Some are snatched from their bodies so violently that they have a hard time accepting it. I try my best to lead them to the other side, but not all of them go." I thought about the girl that still jumped from the balcony over by the new wing and nodded again. "So the ones who don't go, what happens to them?" He smiled, and the effect was very unsettling. "I think you know. You're the one who's been cataloging all the anomalies in this hospital, haven't you?" That surprised me. It seemed everyone knew about my little project. "So then, why don't you take the ghosts that are already here? There are so many of them. They're tired and angry and just looking for escape. Why not take them to something better?" He shook his smooth head. "You speak as if I haven't tried. The bent lady, the jumping girl, the whispering ghost on the 3rd floor, even the mysterious tapper in the morgue are all spirits I've tried to bring to the hereafter. The angrier they are, the more confused they are, the harder it is to convince them to go. Then, of course, there are other forces at work here, too." "Forces? What other forces?" I asked, sitting forward a little. He sipped at his coffee, looking a little unsure of whether or not to continue. What could possibly be here that was scarier than someone who led the dead? "What do you know about the history of this hospital? For that matter, what do you know about the history of this town?" It was my turn to be cagey. I mean, I know about the founding, and I know about the early days of the hospital. He smiled, steepling his fingers, and gave me much too much of his attention. "Did you know, before this was a town of more than a few farms and a dirt road, there was a sanitarium here?" I hadn't. Like a tuberculosis clinic? Yes. I was the guide responsible for that dreary place, too. The dead were much more willing to come with me when the alternative was staying in those less than peaceful halls. The man who'd bought it thought the woodland scenery and the clean air would be good for people, but very few ever saw much help here. It wasn't the staff's fault. Not really. The land here is blighted, you see. It gets into people's heads and often brings out their darker nature. It's been the site of many terrible things throughout its life, not to mention being in proximity to the prison that sits in those same woods. This is not a nice place, and that energy sometimes shackles people here, makes the barrier between the here and the hereafter very thin." "Are you saying that Kashmir is some kind of supernatural hotspot?" He nodded. "And always has been. You sit in the middle of a nexus, though you do not know it. Powerful entities control this place, this whole area, and they likely walk amongst you all every day without you being the wiser. One of them doesn't even know his power yet, and if he ever found out, Kashmir, Stragview, the gardens, this hospital, and your very existence would cease." I wasn't sure I believed him. This was all a lot to take at face value, but I sensed no lie in him. He believed what he was saying, and that was the scariest part of all. "I fear your time might be growing short, and I really must get back to work. Were there any other pressing matters you wanted to ask?" My head was still reeling, but I remembered one thing I had made sure to write down. The stairwell. What happens in there? Why do you always come out of it, or some other door? He grinned. "Ah, the doors. The stairwell has little to do with it, but I do seem to come out of it the most. The doors in this hospital don't always go where they're supposed to go. I think you know that already, though. Sometimes they open onto places beyond the barrier. Sometimes they let things in that would be better kept out. Your friend, the handyman, found this out too, I believe. Others have discovered this as well. Some of them don't come back to tell of it either. The doors are how we get in and out of your world, how I move within the hospital. But we have other ways, too. Don't worry. I glanced at the clock and was shocked to find that it was nearly 1 o'clock. Carl would be furious by now, my breaks usually taking less than a half hour, and I got up and thanked the man for meeting with me. It was nice to get to talk to someone who hasn't died yet. If your current job ever seems dull, you should look into being a guide yourself. I imagine it's something you'd be quite good at, though the hours are long and the pay is far from good. We were walking towards the door, me back to my station and he back to whatever work he had to do tonight, when the doors to the cafeteria were suddenly and loudly kicked open. Carl came in, the revolver he wore leading the way, and he told both of us to stop right where we were. I didn't want to believe it, but I knew something was going on. Don't you move a muscle, he said, swinging the barrel at me as I started to try to explain. You two have some questions to answer, and for your sake, you better hope I like the answers. You're still here. Thanks so much for joining us for tonight's spooky tale. If you'd like a little bit more spooky in your life, why not click on one of the videos that appears at the end of our story, or maybe head on over to one of our playlists where you can get your fill of spooky content. If you like your spooky a little more tactile, I've got a new book that's come out. If you'd like your own copy, there's a link below in the description where you can get your own copy of my spooky book. If you like what you see here on the channel and think you might like to support in a more monetized way, then why not come over to Patreon or become a member on YouTube? Speaking of, let's go ahead and thank our members now. Thanks to Civ Garstad, Unicorn Hollow, and Heather for being our Spooky Ghost contributors. Thanks to Janet, Lee Kendall, Saikat, Ronda J, Sue Casper, and Valinator for being our Spooky Skeleton tier contributors. And thanks to Hi Stacy, Winter, Xaronan, Stephanie Carrington, Tyler Parker, Cinnamon Fox, and Sarah Samar 42 for being our Ghostly Reader tier contributors. Thanks, everyone. We just couldn't do the show without you. If you too would like to support the show, we always tell you to come on down to Patreon or check out my member section on YouTube. Spooky Skeleton contributors get their video 12 hours earlier at 8:30 a.m. as opposed to 8:30 p.m. And Ghostly Readers get a book every time I write one on their doorstep. There's actually one coming up here in a few weeks, so if you'd like to get in on that, please go ahead and sign up. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.